to another Teaching Academy professional learning session. This morning's session is around Zoom, the online meeting tool that CSU uses for virtual meetings for teaching and learning. Specifically, that's where we use this tool, or why it was onboarded probably about 6 years ago.
I need something in here, don't I? With a
I
description.
will just get a hold of the people controls so that I can mute people if I need to. All right.
Lachlan,
Yep.
sorry to interrupt. Could you just point me to the lobby? That's at the top somewhere, I'm assuming.
Oh, if you click on the people button, if you can't see it, you need to click on more, then people, and then and if there's anyone in the lobby, you just need to click on admit all. That's it.
Thank you.
All right. I have a Padlet board to present this session on, but what's going to be happening is I'm going to be driving most of this through Zoom. Now, the irony is not lost on me here that we're going to be talking about Zoom through a Microsoft Teams meeting, which is always fun. But I'm going to be driving a Zoom room and talking to you about its functionality as I walk through there. Just put into the chat, Stephen, as well, that if people can't hear, for example, they'll need to rejoin the session. So yeah, it's going to be a local issue. I am joined this morning by Stephen Moore from Division of Learning and Teaching, one of our digital learning officers, and Stephen will be fielding any of your questions, comments, etc. in the chat, and any that he can't get to, I will stop periodically and do my best to get to. But yeah, we will have a lot to get into. What I am going to do first is drop the link to the Padlet board into the chat for those of you that would like to just look at it yourself. I usually use this mostly for myself to know what I need to be covering because, as I said, we're going to be talking mostly whilst looking at Zoom itself. All right, before I open a Zoom session, let's start with this. One of the biggest problems with Zoom at Charles Sturt is that people get confused with the terminology, particularly because there are potentially 3 different ways that we access Zoom and we talk about them depending on who we are. So the first one that I'm going to spend some time talking about is called Zoom Workplace. It's also referred to in some of the documentation as the Zoom desktop application. And it's this thing, which we open from our desktops. If you're on a CSU work computer, you're going to find a Zoom icon, a little blue one that you open, it opens this. This is the workplace or the desktop app, and it's one of the ways that we'll be talking about Zoom today. Another aspect of Zoom that people are probably familiar with is the Charles Sturt Zoom portal, which we access through charlessturt.zoom.us. And it opens up a screen that looks like this. It requires you to sign in, and that will take you into what's called the Zoom backend or the Zoom web portal. So if I was to put in charlessturt.zoom.us, there's that screen, and most people are clicking on sign in at that point, and it opens up all of these settings to do with your Zoom account. In fact, too many settings. There's just too much in there. The Zoom web portal is often referred to as the back end of Zoom. And it's also why it's a good idea for users of Zoom to get more familiar with the Zoom desktop app because it really cuts down on all that stuff in there that you really don't need to be worrying about. It's too busy. So this is the Zoom web portal, the Charles Sturt Zoom web portal. And the last thing that we're going to be talking about today, particularly for those involved in learning and teaching, is the Zoom Learning Technology Integration, which is what we see inside Brightspace. So when we go looking under our communication menus at online meeting and setting up tutorials, etc., we're using what's called the Zoom LTI. And that is a third way of accessing Zoom and creating meetings and schedules. So that's the first thing I just wanted to unpack, is that quite often, particularly in support documentation, or if you've spoken to people on the service desk, etc., they're trying to figure out which part of Zoom you're actually accessing at the time. So you have to be able to distinguish between the desktop app, the Zoom portal, and the LTI inside Brightspace. All right, enough of the slides. I'm going to talk now about the Zoom desktop app. So this is for me over here. I'll just park that there so I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to close it and start right from the beginning. If you are on your desktop, you're basically looking for this blue icon that says Zoom Workplace. If you're on a Charles Sturt computer, it should be there on your desktop. If it's not, easiest way in your search bar is to type in the word Zoom and you'll find it instantly. A lot of people on their own devices, for example, if they're having trouble finding it. So I'm going to open Zoom Workplace. It's opened it over here. Let me move it across. And I will make this a little bigger, but really the giveaway that you're in the Zoom Workplace is these 4 icons that will allow you to do basic functionality like launch a meeting on the spot, which I'll do shortly, join other meetings if you've got a Zoom ID, and also to be looking at your calendar, your schedule, things like that. So let's talk a little about the Zoom Workplace, because Zoom has invested most of its money and development in the last several years into this area. They've created a collaborative workspace environment that's not dissimilar to how we use Teams. So the intention is that workplaces everyone will be signed into this thing and sharing files and other things across it, using all the AI functionality. We don't use any of that at Charles Sturt, but the workplace is still really valuable for you to know about because it is a shortcut for you to get to lots of different tools that you may want to use in your Zoom meeting. And that's what I'm going to talk about briefly here. If we have a look at the options that are in here, you'll find that they've moved them recently all along the left-hand side. The home screen is what we're looking at here, where it allows you to launch new meetings or to schedule new meetings. For me, I can see the Zoom Whiteboards tool, which creates shared whiteboards to bring into Zoom meetings if I need them. There's a calendar showing me Zoom meetings that I've booked. It does talk to Outlook and Teams, so it's going to show you your shared calendar. A contacts list, clips, which I'll talk about when we actually launch Zoom. And right at the bottom, I'm not sure if this is too small or not. Let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit more. Not going to make it any bigger? No, it's not. All right, if you click on the More button on your own Zoom Workplace app, you're going to find it refers to the Zoom apps or the web store that allows you to add other pieces of functionality to your Zoom rooms, like a timer if you wanted one in the meeting. There are lots and lots of others in there. Not all of them are approved, and you would end up needing to submit a request to use them. Zoom Notes is a little collaborative note-taking tool that you can open before your meeting, during your meeting, after your meeting, share with students. The Surveys tool, which refers to quizzes and polls that you can run in your Zoom meeting. All of these tools you can build and open outside of an actual live Zoom meeting. So you could go to your workplace, prepare a note, prepare a document, prepare a poll or a survey or a quiz, and have them ready, and then bring them into any Zoom meeting that you run at any time. Right? So this is a preparatory area, if you will. You can access those features. Arguably, from my point of view, the most important aspect of the Zoom Workplace area is right up here in the top corner, where you can see, hopefully, your profile picture, or maybe you'll just have a little icon of a head. But this area, if you left click on it, is where it opens up and shows you right at the top which account you are currently signed into in Zoom. So most of the problem that we have with jobs being logged around Zoom problems are because people are not signed in using their Charles Sturt Zoom login. A lot of people got their own personal accounts. Some of it was during COVID, other people had them from beforehand. But if you're not accessing Zoom through your Charles Sturt account, you will have limited functionality in Zoom. It'll only go for 40 minutes to begin with. You can't have meetings longer than 40 minutes on a personal account, a basic one. The recording will cut out. You won't have host controls in a lot of cases. All that sort of stuff can happen if you're not signed in as a Charles Sturt user. So this is usually where I glance first to make sure that I am signed in properly with my CSU account. And if I'm not, I would be signing out and then signing back in using my work login. So this is the first check. The other valuable thing about this area, your status area in the top right, is that it's where you can check for Zoom updates, and these guys are prolific. They update probably every couple of weeks. So if the last time you actually updated a Zoom meeting like me was November or something, you're going to find there's been a lot of updates. So I'm going to click on check for updates, and what do you know? There's a new update available, even though I updated it at the start of the week. So a lot of the updates are not going to stop you using core functionality in Zoom, but it is still worth checking this periodically to update. It won't let you do it whilst you're in a live Zoom meeting, but otherwise it'll run and 30 seconds later it'll install. All right, I'm not going to do that now, but it's worth knowing. So that's where we check if we're logged in properly and where our updates are. And as I mentioned before, the workplace is also a spot for you to prepare different parts of your Zoom meeting if you want to. All right, I'll stop there for a moment. Anyone got any questions about the Zoom workplace before I start looking at the other areas? Okay. Again, if you do have them and I'm too quick, Nikki, go ahead.
Do you recommend, if we're on our own personal device, using the desktop app?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yep.
Absolutely. It actually is a faster way of doing things before and after Zoom meetings, and then trying to fish through all of those menus and things through the web portal. I actually find it really handy. And I mean, I haven't even, mentioned to you really that you can access a lot of your own personal settings without the full massive list of personal settings that you have in the back. So it's just an easier way. And I will definitely get to Yanfei's message in a second. The other thing I didn't point out before, you'll notice that there's an option here that says open recordings. So if you want a quick way of getting through all your Zoom recordings, down here, if you click open recordings, it opens up a window directly to all of your Zoom recordings right here. So you can get to all of that stuff much quicker than going through the web portal and trying to find those bits and pieces. Yanfei.
Yes, thank you very much. You probably have said this before. Sorry, I joined a little bit later. But just wondering, I know that in Zooms we have the AI companions that will help take notes. And just wondering in terms of the access from CSUs to these functions.
Okay, so look, I'll stop you there, and I can tell you that CSU has disabled all of the AI companion functionality of Zoom. That was a decision that was made basically by the Vice Chancellor. Essentially, it's all been turned off. So we don't have access to any of those features. And I think the same has been done in Teams. So essentially, at this point in time, if you're trying to use AI functionality that is integrated with Zoom meetings, it's not going to work. You'll need to take assets out of Zoom, like your transcripts or your recordings or other things, and use them in some other third-party tool rather than trying to use the Zoom AI companion.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the institutional position on it at the moment.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
No problem. Cherie also says, if you have docs, do members in the team see them straight away? When you say docs, are we talking Zoom docs, Cherie?
Yeah, now I've never used it, and just when you showed it in the more, it was there in that thing, in that app there. Like if I I'm assuming that that's where the docs, if I wanted to release docs to students while I'm having the Zoom, I'm assuming, but you may talk about it later.
I'll touch on it when I launch the actual live Zoom room and talk about its functionality. It's actually very neat. So I'm glad you asked about it, but I'll get to it when I launch the actual Zoom room so that you know exactly what it is. Thank you very much. All right, let's keep going. As I said, please pile your questions into the chat as well if you've got them so that I can come back to them later. All right, so let's move the workplace off the screen. If I go back to my home screen and go you over there. All right, the next area I want to talk about is the Zoom web portal, but I'm only going to touch on this very briefly. Now, as I mentioned, if we start with charlessturt.zoom.us, it opens up this screen, and most of the time people are clicking on this option here, sign in, and it is giving you a complete listing of everything associated with your Zoom account. They both point to the same place, but there is a lot more information in here. So I'm not going to unpack all of that, but basically some of the things that people come into the Zoom area to do, into the Zoom portal, is to adjust things like their profile settings. They might have images and other information, titles, preferred names, things like that. You can adjust those through that area. You're also able to access all of the information against each of your meetings. You can schedule new meetings. You can look at your previous meetings that are in there. And again, a lot of this functionality is duplicated in each of those different areas that we're talking about today. The other thing that I normally point out to people when they're coming into the Zoom portal is if you want a complete listing of all of your settings against your account, coming into the Zoom portal will give you that full list of everything. The Workplace app has a light list, if you will. So, but the actual settings list in the Zoom portal contains absolutely everything against every tool in the system and what your account lets you do. So if you're wanting a good way to spend half a day, you may want to come in here and have a look through all of those settings. All right, let's talk a little bit about Brightspace. For a lot of you that are involved in teaching and learning, this is probably the only bit that you're really wanting to know more about. And in each of your subject sites, you have the ability to go into the communication area, open up Online Meeting Zoom, and this will talk to your Zoom account. It's loading that in the background. That's what I'm waiting for here. Hopefully yours is a bit faster than mine to load, but I have access to a bit more. And it's now talking to my account, but specifically what of my account is tied to the particular subject site that I am in. At the moment, this is empty, and we'll notice that it has a number of tabs here. Upcoming meetings, so you schedule them, they're in the future. Previous meetings that you've held in this account, it'll have them all listed along here. You're actually able to get a report on attendance, etc., from over on the right here. There is a personal meeting room tab that staff members will see. Can I strongly recommend that you avoid this altogether? The personal meeting room tab and creating meetings that use your personal meeting ID are not fully accessible to students. What I mean by that is it's buggy and it often crops, there's problems associated with it, with the recordings associated with it, and where people can access them or not access them. So really, I'm suggesting to people, unless you have a very strong reason for using the Zoom personal meeting room function, just avoid this. And lastly, the cloud recordings tab. So any meeting that you record in Zoom, when you record to the cloud, is going to appear in here for students. I'm going to make a recording when I launch Zoom in a moment. We'll see them appear in here, and we have a little bit of control over what we can do with those recordings. So let's start with the basics. If you're in your subject site and you want to set up your Zoom tutorials, for example, we would start by hitting schedule a new meeting. It wants a topic. It's going to start with the subject name as it is listed, sort of an abbreviated form up here. So if I was going to call it something like weekly online tutorial, something, maybe you want more specific information, you can put that in there. Don't worry about a description. It's not visible to students. Ignore that bit. When is it happening? Okay, so I'm going to set one for next Monday, 8 o'clock at night. The duration is kind of irrelevant. By default, it's set at an hour, but you're not stopped from recording. The meeting doesn't cut out, so don't get too hung up on the duration aspect. The time zone will sync up with your local device, and it's the same for students. So it picks up on where they are and the computer they're using. Then we get to decide if it's a meeting that's happening every week, for example, recurring or otherwise. So I'm going to tick recurring. It's going to recur every week, and you'll notice when you do this that by default it checks the box of the day that you are currently on. It didn't pick up on the fact that I said I want my first one on a Monday in every week. Why isn't it Monday that's ticked? I don't know, but what it does is look at the day that you're creating the meeting on. So get rid of that and make sure that you're actually choosing the day that you want the thing to happen on. I can see we have a question. Arif.
Thank you, Lachlan. Actually, this is the time when my question will be relevant. I want to set a meeting, for example, on Monday
Yep.
and Friday each week, but the time is different. Can I do that?
No, you'll need to set 2 different meetings. Set one for the recurring Mondays and one for the recurring Fridays.
And that will have a different Zoom ID.
It will have a different Zoom meeting ID, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. And make sure that the naming of them, when you title them, is specific enough that students can tell the difference, because that title is the only piece of information they're going to be given apart from the time and date, etc. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for that. All right, so we've given it a time, we've said it's recurring. Invitees, I'm going to leave this blank for the moment. I'll come back to co-hosts and other things. By default, for CSU, we have a thing called the waiting room turned on. And what that means is when you start the meeting, students who have signed into Zoom will come straight into the room automatically. Students that have not signed into Zoom and just click on the link will come into what's called the lobby, and they will have to wait for you to hit admit to let them into the room. That feature is on by default. You do currently have the ability to turn it off altogether, but it's just important that you know that it's there. We don't have passwords on by default, but you can turn them on. We also don't use this authenticated user setting because basically that's going to stop anyone who hasn't signed into a CSU login from joining the meeting as well. So those are the security features that are turned on in Zoom meetings. Myself, my default settings for people joining meetings is that I have their video and microphone off and they're able to opt in. Not everyone has those same settings, so just make sure you have a glance and see what yours are set at. If you want to change that default setting, you need to go into that settings area that I was showing you before. All right, telephone and computer audio basically means they can join on mobile devices and other mobile devices, and it will allow all of that. And then our meeting options. Enable join before host will mean that students can come into that Zoom link if you're not around, but if a host is not in a Zoom meeting, they will get kicked out after 10 minutes. You need a host to anchor the room, to hold it there. If you don't have a host signed in, they get kicked out after 10 minutes. I also have participants, as I said, muted upon entry. They can opt in to turn their mics on. Otherwise, like we have in all of our Teams meetings, people come in, they're having conversations elsewhere, the cat's going off, the lawnmower's on, whatever. If you don't want that happening, then perhaps select mute on entry. All right, the other option probably worth noting down the bottom here is recording the meetings automatically. If you're going to let students join the meeting before you cannot have this setting turned on because students are being recorded without their consent. Right, so it's one or the other. If you're allowing the meeting to be recorded automatically, then don't allow the students to join before you, and that way when they join they can be notified. They'll get a pop-up on the screen saying this meeting is being recorded. It's just I guess a legal position around that. Lastly, we have an advanced options area, and you can see 2 sections. One is talking about scheduling rights. That's something I'm not going to get into today. If you're working in a sort of administrative role for someone else and you want to know more about scheduling, you can reach out to me. I'll tell you all about it. But the one that may be interesting for you is alternative hosts. This will allow you to add the email address of anyone who has a CSU Zoom account to be added to this list. If they have never signed in to Zoom before, this will not work. You'll get an error, you won't be able to save it. But if I wanted to add Stephen, for example, to this list, I don't know what your email address is, Steve, but I'll have a guess and go smore@CSU, maybe? Let's try it.
Just get off mute here. ST more for some reason.
Excellent. Smore might be someone else.
Yep.
How's that?
Yep, perfect.
All right, and then I hit save. And that person will now be added. I'll get a green saved message coming up somewhere. Oh, it's jumped straight to giving me the meeting information. All right, so it's created the meeting for me. I'm now looking at a summary of the meeting, which will give me things like the link if I wanted to send that to people in an email or something. And also you have the ability to get Outlook items and things as well if you wanted to download those and give them to other people. So you can get the ICS file from there. All right, let me stop there. I know I've been rattling on for a bit and we haven't even opened Zoom yet. So, Stephen, what have I got in the way of questions?
We've got a question from Tegan. Getting a there's an error screen showing up when Tegan tries to get to Zoom through Brightspace. So she's just posted that image of that in the chat.
All right. I suspect that this is because maybe you've never signed into Zoom, the Zoom portal before, Tegan. Does that sound possible?
That would be accurate, yes. I'm new here.
That's it. So if you go to the Zoom portal that I mentioned before at charlessturt.zoom.us, put that into your browser and hit sign in, it'll ask for your CSU login, and that's it. The account will be created in Zoom instantly and you won't get that error anymore.
Okay, I'll try that.
Excellent. Other question? Carolyn.
Thank you, Lachlan. If we've got a lot of partners outside of CSU, is there any facility to make external people hosts, or can you only have CSU registered people as hosts?
Okay, they need to join the meeting first as a guest, and then you can make them a host when they're in the meeting. You can't do it before the meeting, so you can't add them the way we were doing down the bottom with the email address. So they can join it as a guest, and then you can make them a host in there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
No problem. Anita.
Yeah, sorry, I put it in the chat, but my chat message is always delivered late. I don't think it's visible to anyone yet.
That's okay.
I've always been wondering, what's the difference between allocating alternative host in advance and doing it as a co-host during the meeting?
No difference, just where it's happening or when it's happening. So before the meeting, it's in the Zoom interface, it's called alternative hosts. But when we actually join the meeting itself and look at the people menu, which I'll do in just a second, you'll see that it's calling them co-hosts. So it's just where you're looking at that setting. It's exactly the same.
Oh, thank you.
No problem. Are these settings equally available for all CSU accounts? They are. If you're talking about alternative hosts that we looked at when we were creating the meeting a minute ago, it only calls them alternative host here. It won't use any other terminology until you get into a Zoom meeting. I may have misread that, but happy to talk about it in a little bit. All right, so we've created a Zoom meeting inside Brightspace in our online meeting section. What I want to show you at that point, firstly, you may be aware that Brightspace, the integration, sometimes you can get stuck in this screen. You just look up towards the top left where you've got these breadcrumbs and that blue link there that says course meeting. If I click on that or I click on the word home, it's going to take me back to my listing of my meetings. Sometimes we get a bit kind of stuck in those screens and people just reload the whole web page. You don't need to do that. Just find those breadcrumbs in the top left-hand corner. All right, so here are my recurring meetings. These are appearing to any student in the site as well. And the times, the dates, the title, etc. Only the host has the ability to delete those, either individually or all of them. There's the meeting ID. I think what I'm going to do at this point is actually launch the Zoom meeting and jump into this as if I was doing it on the night. So let's do that. Okay, I've clicked the link and we're waiting to Zoom to fire up. Or is it going to trick me? Let's go back. How about over here? Start, try that again. That's better. All right, so it's looking at my Zoom meeting, and what I'm going to do here firstly is I'm going to turn off my webcam in Teams so that I can show you this stuff inside Zoom. So I'm not ignoring you, I promise. All right, so headset, I don't want it to use my laptop's one. Let's go for this one. We'll switch from one to the other for a moment. Turn that on. Hey, there we are. And my headset and audio, great. And now I can join. All right, so let's open this up full screen. That's pretty big. All right, now the Zoom interface has changed recently in a fairly significant way, and what I want to call your attention to down the bottom is what's called the Zoom taskbar. The icons that appear down the bottom now look a little different since the middle of December than maybe what you recall. Maybe not in a drastic way, but what you're now able to do is customize which of these icons you can see and where you see them. So if you want the chat area to be over here on the left, for example, you can reorder those icons that are in Zoom. You can also click on the More button and it will allow you to add other Zoom functions to your personal taskbar. So it's added that customization in. If I wanted whiteboards, for example, to be part of it, if I wanted documents to be part of it, whoops, it's now looking for documents. I'll get to that in a minute, Cherie, I promise. But you can add any of those functions to your tab, including the record function. But basically, you have the ability to decide how many or how few tools in your Zoom room you have available in your taskbar down the bottom. Let's talk about the interface a little bit before we start opening up those tools. First thing that you may or may not know, if you look right to the top left, and I realise this is probably quite small for you, there is a little information icon next to the title of the meeting. If you left click on it, it will bring up the meeting info, including the ID and the link. So if you're looking for a quick way in a live meeting to give someone the link to the room, click on the eye, grab that link, and then you can give it to people and go, here it is, right here in the chat, and you could jump into that live Zoom meeting if you were so inclined. Over to the right, you'll see it's giving you a summary of things like how long has the meeting been going for, and you can also change that view to look at the time remaining. So I talked before about that duration option maybe not being relevant, but if you've set a meeting that goes for an hour and it's important that you know how much of the hour is left, you can switch that and it will tell you how long. For this particular one, for some reason, it's showing me 94 hours. Fascinating. Let's get rid of that. All right, so the other thing I want to point out is that each person coming into a Zoom meeting has the ability to customize their own view. So at the moment, I have a view on called Gallery, which means everyone that joins the meeting is equal. And if they have their webcams on, they're going to be tiled across the screen for me to look at. If I want to change that to speaker, so only the person that's speaking gets all of the real estate in terms of their webcam, I could change that to the speaker view. But there are some other views that you may want to experiment with in there as well. You can't set that for everybody else. It is customizable for every person that joins a Zoom meeting. All right, so I'll leave that on Gallery for a moment and then come down here to the bottom left. Zoom has its audio settings in the bottom left, and I can see while I'm talking the mic's going up and down, so that's working. But you can change between different microphones up here at the top and run tests on what's working, what's not working, how it sounds. You can play around with all of those in the bottom left. A lot of people these days don't want to use headsets, for example, and they've got a speaker, or maybe they've invested in a microphone that's on the desk, but the audio to students may sound, shall we say, dodgy. That may be because they've got the wrong microphone selected. So keep in mind, you want to check those things before you start recording, for example. Same with your video settings. You have those options down in the bottom left. Those are the only two icons in the taskbar that you cannot customize. The rest of them you have control over. All right, then we have some of our tools. Chat's probably the most common one. I've clicked on that here and it's opened it up on the right-hand side. If you want the chat to be, and Stephen's joined me in here, so my gallery view gives us equal weighting, if that's what I have selected. Yep. And if I go back to my chat, you'll notice that there is an option here to pop it out. So if you're working on multiple monitors and you still want to keep an eye on the chat, but you don't want to compromise in how much real estate's being used, use the pop-out function. There's my meeting chat. I can make that as big or as small as I want to, and I can drag that onto other screens so I can look at the chat whilst I'm also looking at the other people in the meeting. Most Zoom functions will allow you to use that pop-out so you can monitor it. The chat in Zoom's actually quite versatile. It allows you to drop in links, images, files. You just drag them straight into the chat. It also has other or I guess novelty items like adding GIFs in or doing different things with text. You can also upload files from Google Drive accounts, SharePoint and OneDrive if you're inclined to, or from your computer. But most of the time now people are just dragging and dropping them directly into the chat area, and it will share those files at that point. Let's see if I've got one handy. There's a file. I've dragged it in. It's a text file, and hit send, and that will then be shared in the meeting chat to everyone in there. So it's very quick and easy to use the chat function for people to actually access those. And it's not really dependent on the type of file as well. You just drag it in there. All right, you're also able to take a screenshot and then drop that into the chat as well. So if I wanted a screenshot from here and clicked on that function and said I want to share this into the Zoom chat, it's now taken that screenshot and added it straight in there, and I can hit share and it's adding that in. So it's a lot more than just text. The Zoom chat function is pretty powerful for what it is. All right, you also have the ability, hitting the drop down, to target people in the meeting. If I wanted to send Stephen a message that no one else could see, I can hit his name there and send him a direct message. And at that point, only he is seeing that. Keep in mind, until you change this back, you're still only going to be talking to that person. All right, so there's our chat. I'm going to move it on to another screen, but if I ever wanted to rejoin it to that panel on the right, look for the 3 dots and merge to the meeting window, and it adds it right back here. Okay, so you have that option. So I'm going to pop it out and drag my chat onto another screen. Now let's talk about sharing. Zoom Share, if we click on the share button, it opens up what is a much busier space than it used to be. But effectively, it's asking, what do we want to share into the room? If I'm honest, I really only use this in just about one way, and that is, if I've got something visual that I want to share with people, I'm going to choose the screen that I have it on. So in this case, I'll say, what have I got going on this screen over here? That'll do. And the other question over here on the right is, do I need to share sound with the audience? So if you're playing a video, for example, in the room, and they need, or audio, and they need to be able to hear it, you must check this box. Otherwise, they're not going to hear anything. Right, so which screen, which sound? There are other options for sharing that you may be interested in, advanced functionality really. So you can upload a document to share it within the whole room space. But to be honest, for me, most of the time I'm sharing my screen. That way I don't have to worry too much about whether or not Zoom has shared it properly. I'll open it on my computer, I'll keep control of it on the screen that I know I'm sharing, and I share the screen. So at this point, I have shared this screen over here into the meeting, and then students will be able to see what I'm doing without necessarily having too much interaction with that object. So if you're sharing things like PowerPoint slides, PDFs, other things, I find it a little bit easier until you get very familiar with that advanced sharing space. Let me stop there for a second. Stephen, have I got people raging in the chat at all? I think we might be okay.
Sorry, Lachlan. Yes, I'm just switching between Zoom to Teams. I was just trying to work out whether there's one person I missed a little bit earlier in the chat. Deegan's all right. Cherie, I was wondering if Cherie, if you answered regarding do members in the teams see the docs straight away? This was from quite a lot earlier.
Right, yeah, I'll talk about the docs in just a moment. I think there's another one there about scheduling meetings and getting notifications. Yes, if you schedule a Zoom meeting, it talks to your Outlook, and you'll get an invitation in your Outlook inbox as well. At the same time, you get the link to it. You'll also get a notification when recordings are made. Speaking of recordings, let's record this team meeting. So I can't see record down the bottom here at the moment, so I'm going to find it in my more area, hit record, and I'm going to record to the cloud. Always record to the cloud unless you've got a very good reason for saving it to your computer. Otherwise, you're going to need to go looking for that recording, and it will be much harder to share it with students. So record to the cloud, it's now recording. I'll also see a little confirmation up the top that it's recording where I can pause that if I need to or unpause it. All right, so I'm still sharing this screen over here, so I better stop sharing. And quite often people can get a bit lost with where the share button is or isn't in Zoom. It can disappear, but what you're looking for is this bar, this green bar with an option down the bottom. This is the share toolbar, and it gives you a lot more functionality on what you can do with your share screen, including turning on things like annotation. So if you want students to be able to draw on whatever it is you're sharing, it creates like a glass pane over the top of it that they can then mark up and annotate. It doesn't affect your document or your screen or anything else. It's just a feature that allows them to annotate the screen that they're looking at. The other feature that you may or may not be aware of is that at the bottom of the share bar, this green area, if you click the little drop down, it gives you a preview showing you what is being shared to students. What can the audience see? And so that is what we're looking at here. So let me bring that across, just remembering that I'm sharing in Teams. There is the Zoom share toolbar. Here is the preview of what's being shared with the audience in the Zoom room. And the other giveaway about sharing in Zoom is the red line that appears around the screen that you are actually sharing. So all of those things can be used so that you can confirm that you're sharing the thing that you actually intended to share. All right, I'm done with my sharing. I'm going to hit stop share. Let me get this bar off the screen over here. All right, let's look at a couple of the other tools quickly because I know time is flying away from me. The participants bar, which used to be called people, and it's certainly called people in Teams. If we click that, it opens up another pod inside my real estate here on the right, and you'll notice that it starts now talking about hosts and co-hosts. A host allows you to change the permissions and access of anyone in the room. So if I'm looking in my participant list, it's just myself and Stephen in here at the moment. If I click the three dots next to it, I can do some things to Stephen's access to this room if I need to. I could make him the host. So before Carolyn was asking about making guests to the room a host or a co-host, I can do that. I can also make that person a participant in the room if I need to. So you have that level of control against every participant's name in the room. You'll also notice you have control over their webcam and video access as well. That's where those icons are coming from. You don't have to leave it in here if you like. You can pop that out and move the participant pane again to another screen if you're working on multiple monitors. So it's also a way for you to be able to control, I'll just point this feature out as well, the mute all button that's at the bottom of the participant pane. So people coming into the room, there's noise and sound and other things happening. The quick way of fixing that, maybe we could point this out to the people running town halls, is to hit mute all. And at that point, it's going to mute everyone that isn't the person that's talking, essentially, usually the host. All right, so that's where that function is. That's the participant function. We've looked at chat, share, participants. Now quickly, I want to have a look at some of these other functions that we have in here. Let me start with Docs so I can finally say to Cherie, this is what it does. The Docs function in Zoom is actually incredibly powerful. It effectively creates a wiki that you can create in advance and then share with the students in the meeting and then outside the meeting as well. And it creates a whole lot of functionality in that space. Interactive media functionality, not just text. That's the main distinction between Notes and Docs. I have one before that I created in my workspace. That's what it's looking for here. Which docs have I created before? I'm going to share this one in the meeting. It's going to ask, what do I want them to be able to do? Do I want them just to be able to comment on things I wrote, passively view or edit? So I'm going to leave it on edit and hit start collaborating. Now what that's going to do is open up in the Zoom meeting that shared document so that everyone in the meeting can start working in that space together. So it's sharing this screen and it's basically prompting all of the participants to start making additions to this space. Now we do have another session about collaborative engagement tools where I look a lot more at the functionality of Zoom Docs. So I'm not going to cover it here today, but I have provided a quick list in here. It's also in the Padlet that talks about all the things you can do in Zoom Docs. But effectively, if you wanted to add checklists in there, if you wanted to add dynamic media in here, you can. That includes a whole lot of things like videos, audio, images, files that you want to embed on the page. It's basically creating a wiki or an interactive web page that you can share with your students in the meeting, after the meeting, outside the meeting. The one caveat that we have using this tool is that they must be signed in as Zoom users. So that same access that we looked at before, going to charlessturt.zoom.us to sign in and access, is required for them to be able to modify this document. All right, so it is closed behind that. So I recommend you have a play with Zoom Docs. It is excellent, but it does have that caveat. They must be CSU Zoom users to be able to engage with it. And again, if I wanted to just grab the link to this document, I could right up the top there and then drop it somewhere else, for example, for people to then access the document. It can also be embedded, is another thing for those of you interested in embedding this type of resource somewhere else, like in Brightspace. So I recommend that you play with the new Zoom Docs tool. It is very, very good. All right, I'm going to stop with that tool for a moment. Have a look briefly at more and see what else we're talking about. I talked briefly before about whiteboards. I'm not going to get time to play around with it today, except to show you that you can add a whiteboard on the spot for people to start playing in, but really it's most effective if you've created it in advance with the structure that you want with this tool. Headings, dividing lines, pages. It is like a version of Miro, effectively, that it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but the learning curve for it is much shallower. It is a very, very easy to use space for people to engage with instantly and start adding things like sticky notes and commenting, etc. in there, which would help if I clicked on sticky notes, and then people can start adding to that space. You can make as many of those boards in a row for people to work through in that type of activity. And then after the fact, you're able to then share the wall with people either via link, or you can get an embed code and embed your whiteboards inside your subject sites for people to continue marking up and using. In fact, you don't even have to use the whiteboard in a live Zoom meeting. You can just create one in your workspace and use it in your subject site. So the Zoom whiteboard tool is actually excellent. It's very, very good and worth playing with. We talk more about that one in our collaborative engagement workshop. All right, let me stop there. I'm going to stop sharing. And what I want to do now is, in fact, stop recording my Zoom session. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm closing that Zoom meeting. Actually, I didn't want to close Teams sharing, so that was silly. Let's go back. All right, I'm going to act as if I've finished my Zoom meeting. So let's end this meeting for everybody. Gives me a summary. How long did it go for? There will be a recording that it's processing. I can also get a recap of the meeting if you're after a summary for it. And I'm now done with Zoom. But if I go back to my Brightspace online meeting space, if you remember, I had organized my Zoom tutorials and I had joined the meeting from here and recorded to the cloud. What's going to happen now, very shortly, in the Cloud Recordings tab, I'm going to see my recording appear in here for students to access. It usually takes about 5 minutes for that to happen. So that's where I would expect to see that meeting. As I mentioned to you before, however, if you're using the Zoom Workplace app, you also have a quick way of accessing all of your recordings here under Open Recordings. And if I pick on this one down here, I can in fact click on that recording and it will open it in a new window on the spot. It's just loading it. It must be a long recording. All right, so here's the recording. Some of the smart AI features that are in place for the CSU account for all recordings is it will generate a summary and things called smart chapters. So if you're using a slide deck, it'll automatically split up the recording based on the transition of the slides. You get a transcript on the side here if you want it that you can download. There's the audio transcript. It'll also try and interpret any of your language during the session into next steps. You can modify this if you need to, if you want to give it to other people, but this is all AI in the background interpreting the transcript and what's happened in the recording. Most of the time, the only thing that we're giving to students in our Brightspace site is the recording itself. So I just want to talk very, very briefly about editing. When you make a recording in Zoom, if you need to make changes to that recording, you open the recording as I've done here, and as long as you're the person who made the recording, you will see a little pair of scissors underneath the recording here that says trim. And that is our recording functionality in Zoom. I'm going to hit trim, and it opens up this blue timeline underneath that allows me to make changes to the recording, to crop, if you will. At the moment, everything in the blue is included. So if I wanted to say take off the first 2 minutes of the recording, I could wind this forward and say, oh, take it up to 2 minutes, and at that point, the moment that I hit the word trim here on the right-hand side, it's going to save those changes to the recording. And when students click on the recording in their Brightspace site, they will only see what was in the blue. So it's topping and tailing at this point, front and back. However, you can also make changes to other points throughout the recording. So if, for example, I had a problem with the bit at the beginning, but also there was another spot in the middle of the meeting that I was worried about. So I might say, oh, actually, at 16 minutes, I swore accidentally, maybe, I don't know, whatever. You want to crop it out? I want to say, I want this included. And then after that's happened, I can then move it here, hit plus, and now I have another one of those tools to say, actually, I want this as well. And in fact, this as well. So you can, in fact, crop at multiple points. Hang on a tick, I'm getting a little bit of background noise. So we'll go people and mute everybody. All right, so that's how we crop and trim our recordings to include multiple points in the recording that you need to remove. Otherwise, it's just going to give you that beginning and end, and you drag those toolbars effectively left and right to make it shorter as required. When you hit trim, it then applies and reprocesses the recording, which is now shorter, and students will only get that when you share the link. If we go back now to our Brightspace site, let's see if our recording has appeared magically. It may be too soon, but let's see. And then I'm going to take questions because I realize I've been talking at 100 miles an hour through a lot of different functionality. Maybe whilst that loads, is it going to appear? Cloud recordings, come on. Yes, it is there. Brilliant. I'll mention this for just a moment. Every one of your recordings that appears for students, when they click on the title of that recording, it'll open up a couple of tiles and the student has the choice to download the video recording, just the audio, if they wanted to just listen to the audio, and they also get hold of the chat. Right? If your students don't see the chat, that'll be in that big collection of settings that we talked about at the beginning, and you probably have it disabled. So you have the option to provide the chat to them as well. So those are the things they can get hold of. It has a recording analytics option underneath, but what you're going to find is that that only applies to people who have signed in to the CSU Zoom account before joining the meeting. If they've joined anonymously, the analytics are not going to be particularly helpful to you. The other option in recordings that you must know about is that by default, all of the recordings are visible to students. If you don't want them to be visible to students by default, look over here on the right-hand side and you'll see Publish All Recordings is currently toggled on. If you turn this off, Zoom will prompt you for every single recording to decide which ones you want students to see and which ones you don't. So you could still make them all available if you wanted to, but you would have that discretion at every individual recording level. Turn it on, turn it off. So if you decide that there's a recording that you don't want students to see, make sure Publish All is toggled off, and then you decide individually whether they can see it or not see it. That's where that function is. All right. Questions? Stephen, I'll start with you if you've got any that are in the chat, and then we'll go with hands, etc.
No worries. I'm just hoping that there was a question that came up there. I think you might have just answered it regarding, now let's see, about scheduling. Sorry, no, it was it was a question regarding can students see recordings in Brightspace iCloud recording area even if we don't share the link? I think you answered that, but please let me know, Arif, if
Yes.
that was.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, great. There's a few others there as well.
I can see Ashley's got one about scheduling. I can answer that one very quickly. A lot of people have a whole bunch of tutorials occurring every week, but there's a break, like the mid-session break, for example. Completely logical. Create them first, the entire block, and then you as the host have the ability to delete any in between that you don't want. So if I hit delete here, it says delete just this one or delete all of them. So make the whole block and then decide which ones you don't need or don't want and get rid of them. It removes them from the list. That's perfectly reasonable at that point, rather than trying to create them individually, because then you get a whole bunch of separate Zoom links and it's a lot more work. So yeah, you don't need to do that at all. All right, let's go with Karina.
Hi, Lachlan. When you record on Zoom, typically, and you're sharing a screen, typically it will record the speaker view. Is there a way to record the shared screen and gallery view? I know you can do it if you record to the computer, but I didn't know if you could do it recording to the cloud.
Absolutely, and really the way to decide what it is that you are capturing in recordings is to go into your settings in the Zoom portal, have a look in that big list of settings that I mentioned before, and you're going to have a look underneath recording, because that gives you all of the options about what you're sharing when you make a recording, what's turned on, what's turned off, including the views, right? So if you scroll down, you're going to find decisions about which views are turned on, gallery views, speaker views, what's being shared, etc. You can customize all of that, and that will have control over what's being provided to students with cloud recordings, for example.
Perfect. Thank you.
My pleasure. Carolyn, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Lachlan. That was all fantastic. I was trying to look for something that was student facing. I can't find anything in the portal that might assist a student with Zoom. Do you know of anything?
Look, I don't off the top of my head, because generally speaking, somewhere between DIT and DSS, for example, they have carriage of that sort of information and support. So it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'd have to go looking for it, but I'm not aware of it off the top of my head. All the stuff that I've made, for example, recordings and quick guides and things like that, have been teacher facing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'll go looking after the meeting and see what I can dig up.
Yeah, thanks, Lachlan.
That's okay. Stephen, have I got any other questions waiting for me? Or if anybody else wants to ask a question, I'm all yours for the last minute or two that we're here, because I realise we've hit time as well.
Sorry, I'm just switching between windows. I'm a bit slow responding here because different windows open.
Someone's asking about the collaborative workshop. It is in the Teaching Academy events area. If I bring that up, shameless plug, hang on one second. Let me bring that up and go Teams. All right, so in the Teaching Academy Teams channel, if you click on PD events at the top, this has all of the sessions. Collaborative engagement tools is on the 19th of February. Next week, in fact. There we go. Who knew? I can also give you the link to the event page in the chat here if you're so inclined. No, that's Zoom Docs. Ignore that one. Let me do it again. Hey, there we go. So there's the link to register for that one if you're interested. All right. Thanks, everybody.
That's all I
Stephen,
can see,
yes.
Lachlan. But if anyone has any questions, I've said to stay back as well. If that works for you, Lachlan.
Yeah, I'm happy to hang around for a minute or two. If you want a copy of the recording, not just the link into the Brightspace subject site. You mean embedding it, Paul? Embedding the Zoom recording into the Brightspace site. Look, Zoom doesn't doesn't actually let you embed recordings from your meetings. That functionality was there right at the beginning, and then they actually disabled it. So I can turn my webcam back on these days. Let's do that. But I know that at the moment, either you're giving the hyperlink or they're looking at the cloud recording tiles, but it doesn't allow you to embed it directly. I think there might be kind of a hack for that if you're using sort of an iframing tool or something to kind of get it, and it would still work. But I have a feeling that there's a difference between doing that in Firefox versus Chrome, for example. Like there's browser security differences as well. I'll have a look, but there's not a simple answer that says you can absolutely do that. At the moment, it doesn't allow for embedding by default with the tool. All right. Look, I'm going to call it there. People have got things to get to, etc. But please feel free to reach out to myself or to Stephen, etc. If you've got any other questions about the session, it will be available, the recording and the Padlet board link, etc., through the Teaching Academy events tab that I pointed out before. Otherwise, have a great rest of the week, and we look forward to seeing you at another of these sessions. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording there.